my AirPods. I'm trying to connect my audio back to my AirPods because if I open my phone, it automatically takes them over to my phone. It's so frustrating. Sorry. I am so sorry about that. Does this sound good? Again, I am sorry that I had that. I opened my phone to this live so I could see chat better when I'm reading off of the probable cause affidavit, and when I did, it switched my headphones over to my phone and from my laptop, and very frustrating. But hopefully everything is all set now. I know there's so much heartache with this one. I reading this probable cause affidavit when it was sent to me, I was outside working on preparing my flower beds to add flowers, hopefully this weekend or next week. And so I just sat out there on the edge of my like a retaining wall I have, and I just cried. This is tough. This is tough. Hey, Wild Violet and Arctic Fox, thank you guys for coming in. Hey, Skilo. All right. Okie dokie. I put a warning up because it gets very, very sensitive. Let me see here. Okay, just seeing if I have another message. We heard about remains last week, but they weren't confirmed. So I didn't want to go live and discuss something that wasn't confirmed by law enforcement. And I think we all had a feeling that that was her, right? We all had that. But you still hold out hope that it's not, and you put yourself in the family's shoes, and but then that's conflicting feelings because if you're hoping that that child isn't Oakley, then that means it's someone else, and it's a range of emotions, and I couldn't imagine being the family in that situation. But I had Sleuthy Goosey and I had put in a request for the probable cause arrest affidavit for Madison Marshall originally, and we had gotten it back, and I was unable to go live that morning for us to discuss it. And then later that day, the news came out about potential remains being found close by, and I just thought, let's just wait and see what this leads to before we do anything. And it led to this, unfortunately. Now, this is a long probable cause affidavit, but it does include all the stuff that was in the other one. So we're just going to go over it all together and get it out of the way. So if I miss anything in chat, I'll try to glance down from time to time, but like I said, it's very long, so and I know everybody is watching, Gannon's trial right now. That's, what I was listening to while I was outside. Um, Also checking tweets and updates about the Vallow trial, and I don't know if you guys heard about what happened with JJ, but that just broke my heart too. Oh, these poor babies. It's like, when will it end? When does it stop? I don't understand sometimes. Hey, Limey, I'm glad you're here. Kelsey, not yet, but I will either this weekend or next. I'm just cleaning up and prepping the beds now. I love flowers. I cannot grow vegetables to save my life, fruit or vegetables. It's like I have a black thumb if it pertains to food. Like they say tomato plants are impossible to kill. Oh, yeah, me, this lady, I'll kill them. But flowers, I am a master at flowers and I love them. So I just prepping my beds and getting the leaves out of them and stirring up the soil and stuff like that. So I really enjoy. I have even since a young age. I've always enjoyed flowers. But and I mentioned in I can't remember if it was glares or chasings because I listen in both of those. Like I take turns going into both of their live streams to listen to the trial. So I can't remember which one I chatted in, but I said I needed to be outside today just listening to that trial because it's kind of nice to have that balance of doing real life stuff and listening to all of this stuff. And I recommend it for everyone to give yourself that balance of taking all of this in and touching grass, so to speak. Skilo, I can only grow vegetables. You you kill succulents, Skilo. Come on. I I feel like I'm mentally delaying this, but let's go through it. Oh, Tuesday Child, I love that. We should all plant some beautiful flowers this weekend for all of the victims that we followed cases of this year and last. Just a small token blessing and thought, I like that Tuesday Child. Oh, we could do blue ones for Gannon and uh, purple ones for Summer and Oaklee, and that's a good idea. I like that. All right. I hope you guys are able to see that. You can read it just fine. Okay, let's see here. So Madison and Rowan were both charged with a bunch. Madison still has her original charges, and Rowan does his as well. And these are just new ones that they've added on. Their charges are the same. When I was skimming through this, the charges are the same. So I'm just going to read through Madison's and then we'll skip over Rowan's. Now, Deets needs to update her laptop and it seems to be bogging down. Oh my gosh, I just pulled a Bullhorn Betty and referred to myself in third person. I need to update my laptop because it's like 2 years old and in Apple time that's like 20, right? So it's bogging down a little bit when I was scrolling through this earlier to make sure it showed up. It kind of pauses in a few spots, but we'll work through that. So count one was neglect of a dependent resulting in death, and that's a level one felony. Count two was neglect of a dependent resulting in death, a level one felony. Count three, neglect of a dependent resulting in serious bodily injury, a level three felony. Four, assisting a criminal, that's a level five felony. Count five is neglect of a dependent, a level six felony. Count six is neglect of a dependent, a level six felony. And count seven, neglect of a dependent. So those, we're gonna go over here, like what each of those counts are for. Count one, on or about February 9th, 2023, Madison Marshall, being at least 18 years of age and having the care of Oaklee Snow, a dependent less than 14 years of age, did knowingly place said dependent in a situation that endangered the dependent's life or health, and which resulted in the death of Oaklee Snow. Count two, on February 9th, Madison, being of at least 18 years of age and having the care of Oaklee, did knowingly deprive said dependent of necessary support, failed to obtain medical care, which resulted in the death of Oaklee Snow. Count three, Madison did knowingly place said dependent in a situation that endangered the dependent's life or health. And that said act resulted in serious bodily injury to said dependent. Unconsciousness is what they claim on count three. Count four, Madison did assist Rowan Waters by disposing of the body of Oaklee Snow. knowing Rowan Waters had committed a crime, murder, a felony with the intent to hinder the apprehension and/or punishment of Rowan, and further, Madison was not standing in the relationship of parent, child, or spouse to Rowan. Count 5. On or about or between January 15th and February 9th, Madison Marshall, having the care of Oaklee, did knowingly place said dependent in a situation that endangered the dependent's life or health. Count 6. On or between January 15th and November 9th, Madison, having the care of CS. Now that is um, Oakley's little brother, the 7-month-old little brother. Did knowingly place said dependent in a situation that endangered the dependent's life or health. Count 7. On or about February 9th, Madison, having the care of CS, a dependent, did knowingly abandon said dependent, all of which is contrary to statute and against the peace and dignity of the state of Indiana. No, Stilo, I don't have Discord open on my laptop. I never go on Discord on my laptop. Thank you, though. So skimming through, we'll go through those once again. I'm pretty sure Rowan's were all the same. I didn't see one different. Okay, I missed this. So this one's different. On count 5, on or about February 9th, Rowan Waters, a person at least 18 years of age, again, sorry, I was outside in the sun when I skimmed this the first time, did knowingly touch Oaklee Snow, a person of under the age of 14, in a rude, insolent, or angry manner by throwing Oaklee Snow, resulting in bodily injury. That is bruising. Okay, and then the rest are the same. So they're just making that one specific to him. And then he has a count A. Is it? Okay, that's abandoning. All right. So then we will get into the why. See, there's that little freeze. I just got to give it a second. Okay, so this is Nicholas Hubbs. He was the detective on Oakley's case from Marion County. And so Nicholas Hubbs swears that I am a police detective with the Indianapolis Metropolitan Police Department, IMPD. I am a law enforcement officer, as that term is defined, and I have been a law enforcement officer for approximately 19 years. I'm a graduate of the Indiana Law Enforcement Academy and the IMPD Leadership Academy. I've completed basic detective school, currently assigned as a criminal investigator in the missing persons unit with IMPD. I'm also a task force officer with the FBI. Nice. Um, and then just a reminder that this affidavit does not contain each and every material fact known to him and other agencies. And that you're gonna have that with every affidavit. It doesn't These affidavits give us clues into what happened, but they don't give us every single fact. And I think some people forget that when reading affidavits. They can and they will leave certain things out. They just have to put in enough for the arrest, right? So, hold on one second, I'm gonna grab drink. Okay, sorry. I had took a big chug of soda right before this live, and I felt like I was gonna burp, but it didn't happen, so I didn't want to do that on a live. Okay. Facts of the investigation. On October 26, 2022, Madison Marshall contacted the I've heard this said 3 different times and I still can't get it right, but Ofuxi? Ofuski? it's a tough one. I know that's a tribe out there, so I'm pretty sure that's why it's a difficult one. But she contacted the county sheriff's office there to report allegations of physical assault by her boyfriend, Rowan Waters. Marshall alleged that Rowan had struck her and 1.5-year-old daughter, Oaklee Snow, in the face during an altercation the day prior. Rowan then hit Marshall in the head when she attempted to intervene in the assault. Deputies with the OCSO, I like that better, arrived at Marshall's shared residence with Rowan in Cromwell, Oklahoma, and attempted to make contact with the occupants. Rowan answered the door and asked the deputies if they had a warrant to be on his property. Before they could answer, he slammed the door in their faces. Such a standout guy, right? The deputies attempted to explain through the closed door the purpose of their presence there was for a welfare check, but Rowan yelled for them to get the fuck out. As the deputies returned to their marked police vehicles, a blue-collared SUV pulled up next to them. They identified multiple occupants inside of it, to include Marshall, Oaklee, and Marshall's 3-month-old son, CS. Rowan appeared to see Marshall's interaction with the officers and exited from the residence. He immediately began yelling so that the deputies could no longer hear what the occupants of the SUV were saying. Rowan also began playing, got our little pause there, loud music to further inhibit their conversation. The deputies eventually left the property after Marshall attempted to assure them that she and the children were no longer in danger. So they couldn't do anything, with her saying, yeah, we're fine because it's just a welfare check. Later that day, ZS contacted the OCSO to inform them that Marshall would now like to make a formal report to them. ZS, and that's going to be Oakley's dad, identified himself as the biological father of Oaklee and CS. Deputies arrived at the father's residence in Cromwell and spoke with Marshall. She was present with her 2 children. Marshall stated that Rowan had struck Oakley in the mouth with an open hand on October 25th because she had been crying. Marshall lifted up Oakley's upper lip so that the deputies could see the cut on the other side. Marshall explained that after Rowan hit Oakley, she confronted him. He then slapped Marshall across the left side of her face. The impact left a contusion over Marshall's left eyelid and cheek, which were visible to the deputies. They photographed Marshall's and Oakley's injuries and documented the report in order to present the case to the county prosecutor's office for possible charges. Marshall requested that only charges be filed against Rowan for his abuse against Oakley rather than her. Hmm. On November 7th, the district court of that county filed a warrant for Rowan's arrest for the charges of child abuse and domestic assault and battery in the presence of a minor. On January 19th, ZS reported the disappearance of Oakley and CS from his home in Cromwell, Oklahoma. He reported to the Seminole County Sheriff's Office that Marshall and Rowan took his children from his home without authorization and had likely fled to Indianapolis to be with Rowan's family. On March 3rd, the Greenwood Village in Colorado Police Department located and arrested Rowan Waters for his outstanding warrant after responding to a complaint regarding occupants of a room at a local Best Western hotel. It was located at 9231 Road in Greenwood Village, Colorado. Through their follow-up investigation at the scene of the arrest, they determined that Marshall had also been staying with him at the hotel, but had no reason to be detained at the time. So I've heard a previous creator mention that she didn't go to Colorado, but there's the proof that absolutely she was. And there's more proof of that coming up. Additionally, there were no signs that children had been with them. Law enforcement identified Rowan's cellular telephone number However, no cell phone was present on Rowan Waters' person upon his arrest. Deputies from the OCSO learned of Rowan's arrest that day and requested assistance from the GWVPD with interviewing him about the disappearance of the children. Detectives interviewed Rowan that same day. Rowan stated that he had traveled from Oklahoma with Marshall and her two children in his blue-colored Dodge Durango. I guess license plate. They stayed at a trap house within the city of Indianapolis so that he and Marshall could use drugs. He further stated that he and Marshall had made the decision to abandon CS at the trap house and had also left Oakley behind in Indiana before traveling to Colorado. He added that his sister, KW, had recovered CS from the house and had since turned him over to the Indiana Department of Children's Services. Rowan was unable or unwilling to provide any further information about the trap house of the location of either children. So this is stuff we've, went over and covered before, but it's just going in way more in depth, okay? In the days that followed, Detective Craig Tangeman, we're gonna go with Tangeman. Craig Tangeman of the man, they're giving me all the tough words on this. Arapahoe County Sheriff's Office assisted the GWVPD investigators with reviewing Rowan's jail calls made within the Arapahoe County Detention Center while he was pending extradition back to Oklahoma. Rowan frequently talked to his mother, identified as BP, who was a current resident of Indianapolis, Indiana. During these calls, he informed BP that he had lied to the police and had indeed been present when the children were each abandoned. He admitted to assisting Marshall with specifically dropping Oakley off somewhere. However, he did not provide specific details. BP informed him that Marshall had his cell phone now. So Marshall ended up with that phone that was talked about previously. Rowan also spoke to Marshall from that phone number. She told him that she planned to change her name, though she never told him what her new alias would be. She explained that she had since made contact with BP following Rowan's arrest from that phone number and asked her what she should do now. They agreed to have Rowan's older brother, BW. Okay, so they're talking to Rowan's mother and asked Rowan's mother what she should do. And then they agreed to have Rowan's older brother, BW, and his wife, DW, travel to Colorado to take her back to Indianapolis. Marshall explained that BP, which is Rowan's mom, was coordinating these plans with the brother and sister in law on her behalf. There was no discussion as to the whereabouts of Oakley or CS. Okay. I understand why they have to use abbreviations, so we're just going to have to get creative in remembering all of them. On March 6th at approximately 4:30, Detective Tangeman contacted Special Agent Rothermich. Let's go with Rothermich of Indianapolis office of the FBI to report the above findings from the ACSO and ACDC, believing Oakley and CS to be in extreme danger. Detective Tangeman requested FBI Indianapolis's assistance with locating them. Rothmich in turn contacted Marion County's office and confirmed that KW had reported the abandonment and recovery of CS on February 9th. She had informed the caseworkers that her brother, Rowan, and Marshall had left the child alone at a residence because they needed to take Marshall's 2-year-old daughter, Oakley, to the hospital. So KW is Rowan's sister here. So his sister was unsure if and when they would return. DCS informed Rothermich that Z Snow had taken back custody of CS earlier that afternoon and had likely returned to Oklahoma. So we're up to the point where Rowan's sister has handed we know his name's Colton, has handed Colton over to DCS, and then Zach, Oakley's father, had went up to Indianapolis and taken back custody of Colton, and Oakley's still missing. Rother Mitch notified your affidavit of the above investigation and requested the assistance of the missing persons unit with locating Oakley and Marshall. Okay, so then they traveled to Rowan's mother's place of employment to obtain a statement as to her knowledge of of their whereabouts. BP stated that Rowan had arrived in Indianapolis back in early February or late January. He had traveled in his blue Dodge Durango with his girlfriend Marshall and her two small children. The mother had only seen them once. However, she had allowed them to stay at one of her residential rental properties. It's located at 305 Albany Street. The mother had bought baby formula and supplies to assist them with caring for the kids during their stay, since they had arrived with nothing. She knew Rowan and Marshall's to actively use drugs, to include during their recent visit to Indiana. So Rowan's mother knew that they were on drugs and knew that they had the children. Wow. BP recalled Rowan's friend named Chad calling her on or about February 9th to say that Rowan and Marshall had left him alone with CS. He requested that she immediately come to 305 Albany Street to take custody of him. Excuse me. She agreed and rushed to the house. Upon her arrival, she observed Chad standing outside the front of the house holding Colton. Colton had no clothes on. She then contacted KW, which is Rowan's sister, to come to the house to help take care of the baby. This was because the mother needed to return to work that day. KW agreed and arrived shortly thereafter. BP, the mother, was aware of Rowan's arrest in Colorado and had spoken to him multiple times over jail calls since then. She stated that she had agreed to help Marshall return to Indiana because she did not think that Marshall had anybody else. Therefore, she sent her eldest son, BW, to Colorado to pick her up and to also recover Rowan's Dodge Durango. She reported that BW had successfully returned with both Rowan and the vehicle to Indianapolis in the days that followed. So she's just describing the fact that Rowan's mother helped facilitate all this relocation. Rowan's arrested in Colorado. They send out Rowan's big brother to pick up Madison, bring her back to Indianapolis, and return to get Rowan's Dodge Durango back. BP identified her cell phone number. She informed that it was her understanding that Marshall now had custody of Rowan's cell phone, and she believed that Marshall had taken it prior to Rowan's arrest in Colorado earlier that month. So she also said on February 9th, she had called her to ask her to come to 305. Oh, no, no. Sorry, we're talking to KW now, which is Rowan's sister. So the sister stated that on February 9th, her mother had called her to ask her to come to 305 Albany Street to help take custody of Colton. KW agreed and rushed to the house. She contacted Rowan by cell phone to ask why he and Marshall had left Colton alone. He explained that Oakley had been bouncing on a bouncy ball that day and had fallen. He claimed that as a result of her injury, he and Marshall needed to take her to the emergency room. Given the above circumstances, KW feared for Colton's well-being at the Albany Street residence and asked her husband to pick them up so that she could temporarily care for the baby at her own home. Approximately 15 minutes later, her husband arrived. Rowan and Marshall arrived back at the Albany residence at the same time. KW neither saw Oakley nor did she attempt to speak with Rowan or Marshall before departing with Colton. She explained to Rothermich and your affidavit that she did not believe that Rowan and Marshall could have driven Oakley to the nearest hospital and then returned back to the house in that short amount of time. I know this is a lot we're going through, but it really lays the foundation for what is coming next. And so I just want to make sure we have all the accurate information. Sorry, I had a little coughing fit there, so hopefully my throat will feel a little better now. Okay. So KW, Rowan's sister, contacted DCS that night and asked them to take custody of Colton. She further informed them of the possible circumstances of Oakley being taken to the hospital for a head injury earlier that day. The sister informed your affidavit and Rothermich that she had previously provided the same information to detectives with the SCSO, that's the Oklahoma Seminole County office. The sister further stated that on the night of March 3rd, Marshall arrived at her residence asking if she could stay there. She told her that she could stay only if she told her where Oakley was. Marshall refused and left her property on foot. The sister had not seen or spoken to Marshall since that time. However, she recalled visiting Rowan and Marshall at the 305 address back in late January when they had first arrived in Indianapolis. She observed both Oakley and CS to be present at their house that day. She additionally observed Marshall assisting Oakley to use the bathroom at one point. Wilkerson saw bruising along. Oh, I hate that they messed that up. My bad. They forgot to redact that. The sister saw bruising along Oakley's legs. She immediately confronted Rowan and Marshall as the source of Oakley's visible injuries. Rowan and Marshall both became extremely defensive and ordered her to leave their house. Since Oakley's disappearance, the sister made efforts to find out what happened to her. She stated that she had visited multiple nearby hospitals, all of which were unable to confirm if Oakley was ever a patient. She also spoke with the neighbors at 305 about any information that they may have had about that day that Oakley was last seen. One unidentified nearby resident stated that he had last observed Rowan and Marshall leaving the house with what looked like a child wrapped in a blanket. He stated that the child did not appear to be moving, talking, or crying. The sister informed David and Rothermich that both Rowan and Marshall had told her that they had voluntarily chosen to give up Oakley in Indianapolis. Okay, so they were told that they chose to give up Oakley. She quoted them as collectively saying, "We handled it," and that they had a hard decision to make. They were unwilling to provide any further details as to how they had given her up or where she was now. The sister believed that they had likely harmed Oakley and that she was in extreme danger. So that's a little piece of new information that wasn't in the previous stuff we've talked about. It should be noted that Rothermich identified Community South Hospital located here, blah, 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 um, as the most logical places that Rowan and Marshall could have taken Oakley to see if she was suffering from a severe physical injury. They verified through the security offices at both hospitals that Oakley was never a patient there and that they had not located a 2-year-old white female abandoned there in 2023. Okay, so the sister identified R. Waters, Rowan's close friend and roommate at 305, as the black man known as Tennessee. She stated that Tennessee was present at the house that day Oakley disappeared. Through further investigation, they were able to identify Tennessee as CM. So here is where we're getting into all the new information. I just wanted to lay the groundwork of what led up to this, right? Hi, Duchess. I'm so glad you came in. Hey, Quimbala. What's wrong with? I don't know what's wrong with these parents, Limey. I don't know why they just wait. It gets worse, but let's get into it. All right. On March 7th, they interviewed CM after locating him at the 305 residence. CM stated that he had been friends with Rowan and recalled when he, Marshall, Oakley, and CM had moved into the house back in late January. CM intermittently resided at the residence at the time. He described Rowan and Marshall as avid drug users. They typically snorted heroin, which would cause them to be non-functioning for prolonged periods of time. He further described Rowan and Marshall's care towards the children as relatively inattentive. They rarely, if ever, held them and instead would place them in front of the TV for the majority of the day. He never saw them provide the children with any love or affection. However, CM did also observe bruising on Oakley's leg prior to her disappearance. Just to pause here, I don't understand why they didn't leave Oakley and Colton back in Oklahoma. Why did they take her from Oklahoma and Colton? Why'd they take either one of them from Oklahoma? If they wanted to go off on a drug bender and do whatever and not be parents, why take the kids? CM remembered seeing Oakley earlier in the day on February 9th. She walked up to CM when he first entered the 305 house that morning, and she allowed him to pick her up. However, CM noticed that she was wearing makeup around her eyes and mouth. He had never seen her wear makeup before, and it appeared that it had been applied by an adult. She also noticed a line going from her bottom lip to her chin that resembled a bruise. CM stated that he had left the house and did not return until later that day. This was the last time he saw Oakley. Later that day, CM observed Rowan briefly at BP's, which is Rowan's mom, at, at the mother's nearby place of employment. CM was also visiting there at that time. Rowan seemed in a rush and somewhat frantic. He left after briefly conversing with BP, his mother. So CM then went to visit with B. Waters, who he was also close friends with. He remembered B. Waters, which is, I'm guessing, a brother, receiving a call from BP, Rowan's mom, later that afternoon in which she seemed extremely upset. I don't know where all this is heading, but it sounds like a whole family knew about a whole lot of things, and I'm not making accusations, but that's what it's starting to sound like. B. Waters responded by saying, I don't know what the fuck Rowan has going on, but you all need to deal with it. B. Waters then hung up the phone. CM stated that B. Waters would not tell him what the call was about that day and had since become much more distant towards him. So that's the guy that went and picked up Rowan, Rowan's brother, and that's what he was saying on February 9th. Wow. Later that night, CM returned to 305 Albany Street. He witnessed both Rowan and Marshall there without either of their children. Both of them seemed high on drugs to the point of being incapacitated. CM identified one of his cell phone numbers. Okay. So then they executed a search of 305 Albany Street following the granting of the warrant because they were able to use CM's statement to get that access. So they both returned to the residence to participate in the search. They observed numerous baby items on the first floor of the residence. This included clothing, toys, a playpen, rocker, unused diapers, and other childcare items. Members of the IMPD crime lab conducted a walkthrough of the residence, but they found no obvious signs of a crime scene. Therefore, no items were taken at that time. Detective Eric Parrish of the IMPD Missing Persons Unit and your affidavit both separately interviewed a nearby neighbor of 305 Albany Street. She informed both of us that she had observed a cleaning crew or a work company arrive at the residence sometime in February. The crew painted as well as moved items out to include a roll of carpet. They worked late into the afternoon from what she recalled. She was unsure of exactly what date this had all transpired on, but was confident that it transpired at 305 Albany Street on or around the Super Bowl. But she stated that if the police were looking there for evidence of something, that it was probably gone now. On March 8th, the MCSC authorized a warrant to seize and review historical call logs and cell phone history from those two numbers, that's Rowan's and the brothers. The MCSC further authorized a ping warrant be issued to track Rowan's in order to assist law enforcement with locating Marshall, who they believe now had custody of Rowan's phone. On this same day, the MCSC also authorized a warrant to seize and search the Dodge Durango that had been previously registered and used by Rowan. Members of the IMPD and FBI recovered it from outside of the home address of B. Waters. Upon law enforcement's arrival, B. Waters' wife, T. Waters, informed them that she had just thoroughly cleaned out the vehicle's interior the day before. I just skimmed this, y'all, but I'm saying this is what in the heck is going on with this family? Okay. The only one whose input I'm liking right now is that sisters who called and searched and tried to do something. Something seems a little shady here. Okay. Upon law enforcement's arrival, okay, they said that she explained that she had done this because the Dodge had smelled overwhelmingly like animal feces. The IMPD transported the vehicle to IMPD's Animal Control Center for temporary holding in lieu of the search. I wonder why they took it there. The missing persons unit initiated the physical search of the Dodge Durango that day. Detective Canine Handler Anthony Weaver first walked a certified cadaver-smelling canine around the exterior of the vehicle. The dog indicated that human remains may have been inside the Durango. IMPD's Crime Lab unit then searched the interior. They located what appeared to be dried blood splatter splatter in the rear compartment of the SUV. Crime Lab physically removed the cushion material and submitted it to the IMPD property room for holding. Look at all this work that they're doing. I just want to relate this to other cases when we think that things aren't being done and aren't happening behind the scenes. They are, and they take time, and we just don't know about them. So look at all the work that they've put into this. The good Nunya, I'm with you. I'm with you, but I mean, I don't have any proof of that, but that's what it's sounding like, isn't it? Okay. So they put it in the property room for holding on March 9th, 2023. Your affidavit and Rothermich interviewed DW. So that's Rowan's brother. She was aware of law enforcement's. Oh, no, no, sorry. DW is the sister-in-law. My bad. Sister-in-law. She was aware of law enforcement's investigation into the whereabouts of Oaklee. DW stated that she had joined BW on his trip to Colorado earlier that month to transport Rowan's Dodge Durango back to Indianapolis. BP, Rowan's mother, paid for her and his brother to fly out on or about March 2nd. Upon their arrival, they took a ride share to a Best Western hotel where they came in contact with Marshall. So we're at March 2nd when that happened. Marshall gave them the keys, and the three of them then drove back to Indianapolis. Shortly after departing, DW observed Marshall throw her cell phone out the window. Sometime later, Marshall informed DW that she had never wanted Oaklee and tried to explain how challenging motherhood had been for her. Marshall also told her that she had ultimately intended to go to North Carolina to be with Nick. Okay, who's Nick? Then they interviewed BW. Now that is the brother, that's Rowan's brother. BW recalled the trip to Colorado on March 2nd. Upon their return to Indianapolis with Marshall, BW stated that he had dropped Marshall off near the intersection of Troy and Shelby. BW got back in contact with Marshall on March 4th. So they drive her all the way back and just drop her off in the street? Okay. She did not have a phone, but she did not have a phone, but he was able to find her hanging out at a nearby business. BW informed your affidavit that he had picked her up around 5:30 that evening and drove her to the Greyhound bus station located in downtown Indianapolis. He knows the address to be 350 Illinois Street. BW further stated that he had paid about $180 in cash for her to have a one-way ticket to Fayetteville, North Carolina. The departure time was 7:30 that night. BW described Marshall as having changed her hair color to black and only having a couple of bags with her when she left. He was unaware of her contacts or current whereabouts. And okay. Let's back this up for a second. So this guy, BW, drops her off on March 2nd at a random intersection. Well, I'm sure it wasn't random, but random to them, but drops her off at an intersection and then didn't have any contact with her for 2 days, and then just decided to go find her at a nearby business and take her to a bus station and pay $180 for a one-way ticket to Fayetteville? Okay, sure, I believe that. BW recalled receiving a phone call from CM on or about February 7th. On that, so BW got a call from that friend that was back at the 305 house, remember? I'm guessing that's Chad. On that day, CM informed him that Rowan and Marshall had taken Oakley to the hospital to be treated for some kind of injury. However, BW explained that he was done with Rowan by this date due to an altercation that had transpired between the two of them days earlier. BW recalled this earlier occasion where he had previously arrived at 305 to visit with Rowan. At that time, he observed bruising. Everybody sees all this bruising on Oakley. Everybody. And they did nothing. Why didn't one of them at least scoop the baby up and get it out of there? Okay. At that time, he observed bruising on Oakley. BW stated to your affidavit that he immediately attacked Rowan. Oh, you're going to attack him, but you didn't get the bait. Okay. Attacked Rowan, who he confidently believed was the responsible party for these visible injuries. The two briefly fought before BW left the property. Okay, so you just beat him up and then leave the child who he gave bruises in his care. That makes perfect sense. However, BW never attempted to call the police or DCS over what he had observed that day. I don't know, guys. What do you think about that? Yeah, I don't know. Maybe that I'm not going to speculate live. Okay. After this fight, BW and Rowan stopped speaking to each other. The next time that BW heard from him was in the early afternoon hours of February 9th. He received a text from Rowan that simply stated, "Bro, I need you." BW stated that he did not reply or inquire further into what Rowan needed help with that day. Okay, that's possible that, he saw some crap go down, beat up his brother, and then just was like, wiped his hands of it, cut his brother off, and took off, and, decided I didn't want to talk to him anymore. But then why, when his brother was arrested, did he fly out to Colorado, pick up the Durango, drive it back? Because even if the mom paid for that, that's still taking a significant chunk out of your time in life to do that. Bring Marshall's back, drop her off, and then later, 2 days later, just randomly go find her somewhere and send her to North Carolina. That don't make no sense to me. On March 12th, Rothermich interviewed ZS over the phone. ZS informed him, this is Zach, the dad, informed him that Marshall had a close friend that likely resided in Fayetteville, North Carolina. He provided her name for possible follow-up. On or about this same day, AT&T returned the sought records for Rowan's cell phone. Special Agent Nicole Robertson reviewed the returned records. Got a little pause. Okay. And determined that Rowan's number had numerous incoming and outgoing calls with CM's identified cell phone number and BP cell phone number throughout the afternoon and night of February 9th. So Chad and Rowan's mama and Rowan are having several incoming and outgoing calls the night that Oakley was murdered. So Robertson also identified Rowan's number as having made a single outgoing call to 911 on February 9th at 1:43 p.m. Your affidavit has since been able to determine through IMPD dispatch that the call was disconnected before an operator could answer. The operator quickly attempted to call Rowan's phone back, but there was no answer or return call. Furthermore, there was no collected location history for that number between the hours of 2:30 and 4:30 that day. Ugh. People think they can get away with stuff, and there's a trail and a track for everything, isn't there? Wow. Okay. To add, the historical call log records for Rowan's number showed it making multiple outgoing calls to CM, that's the trap house dude, between 1:45 and 2:09 on February 9th. These calls immediately followed the attempted call to 911 at 1:43 p.m. The records next showed that the cell phone received multiple incoming and outgoing calls from BP, that's his mom's cell phone, between 2:09 and 2:31 p.m. that day. These were the last communications that the Rowan's cell phone made before likely being powered down until 4:47 p.m. Nice, guys. The next communication made by the cell phone was back to BP's, his mother's, and it doesn't say it didn't say when it was made. It just says that it was back to BP's. Okay, AT&T also began providing ping locations for that number. Detective Tangman and fellow officers with the ACSO ultimately located and recovered the device from the front desk of the Econo Lodge, located in Lyman, Colorado. The staff explained that they had found the phone abandoned in the parking lot of the hotel on or about March 3rd. Oh, at least someone's telling the truth. She did throw it out the window. Detective Tingman determined the cell phone device to be an iPhone 14. He placed the iPhone 14 into FBI Denver's property room, awaiting transfer to the FBI Indianapolis field office for long-term holding. On March 13, your affidavit went to the Greyhound bus station located at 350 Illinois Street to inquire about their surveillance videos and travel manifest. Employees informed me that nobody by the name of Madison Marshall had departed on a Greyhound bus between the dates of March 3rd and March 5th. However, they confirmed there were indeed departures for that date during this window. They explained that if a customer paid in cash, there was no process to verify the name that he or she had given for the ticket. The employees also explained that the managers with access to the bus station surveillance cameras were not present that day. This same day, ZS, Zachary the dad, called Rothermich with information pertaining to Marshall's potential whereabouts. ZS stated that KW had informed him that Marshall had recently gotten on a Greyhound bus to travel to Fayetteville, North Carolina. CS began looking through publicly accessible information within Marshall's three known Facebook accounts. These people always have multiple Facebook accounts. These accounts maintain the usernames of Maddie Marshall Bunny, and Maddie Cooper. To note, the MCSC had previously authorized a warrant to search these accounts as it related to the investigation to Oaklee and Marshall. Okay, so that's their warrant there. Gotta pause full again. Okay, so because of ZS's efforts, he identified a mutual female Facebook friend of Marshall who maintained the username BT, Thomas. Z Snow knew Thomas to be a real person. He also knew her username to be her true name. She was known to reside in or near Fayetteville, North Carolina. She had also visited Marshall in Oklahoma in years past, which was how ZS had come to know her. He explained all of the above information to Rothermich. He noted that Marshall and BT were close friends. He suspected that if Marshall were to flee to North Carolina, then DT would undoubtedly be the person she would stay with and confide in. Upon receiving this information, Rothermish and the FBI were able to further identify BT's true name to be BT, well, they're just using her abbreviations, as previously provided, as well as her most recent home of residence to possibly be in Bladenboro, North Carolina, which is approximately 45 minutes south of Fayetteville. On March 14th, your affidavit and S.A. Rothermich returned to the Greyhound bus station. Greyhound employees voluntarily provided Rothermich with access to the station's internal and external security cameras, as well as permission to download the retained footage as needed. Rothermich successfully extracted footage between the hours of 7:30 and 8:30 p.m. on March 4th. Rothermich then reviewed the video feed and observed a white female matching the description of Marshall entering the Greyhound bus station at that time, with a white male that strongly resembled B. Waters. B. Waters appeared to be waiting for Marshall to board a bus. S.A. Rothermich watched Marshall loiter in the interior public area while she waited that night. He observed what appeared to be a cellular telephone in her hands, which she actively and openly used throughout this time. On March 15th, T-Mobile returned the sought historical records for CM's, that's Chad's, cell phone number. The returned cell site history showed that his phone actively remained in the vicinity of 305 Albany Street on February 23rd between the hours of 1 and 4. So Chad's phone didn't leave the 305 address that day. Okay. On March 16th, the MCSC issued a warrant for Marshall's arrest for neglect of a dependent in violation of that Indiana code. On March 17th, Rothermich requested the assistance of the Fayetteville Resident Agency of the Charlotte Field Office of the FBI. The matter was ultimately assigned to Task Force Officer Growalski. We're going with Growalski for follow-up. TFO Growalski traveled to BT's identified home of residence in Bladenboro, North Carolina. She was unable to make contact with Thomas at her residence at that time, but identified a possible phone number for her. Growalski spoke to Thomas over the phone and explained the current situation, to include the need to find Oaklee Snow and Marshall. Growalski described BT's responses to her to be evasive and non-committal in her willingness to assist investigators. She denied having any recent contact with Marshall or knowing the whereabouts of Oaklee. On March 18th, Zachary recontacted Rothermich. See, I told you guys Dad was putting in work. He truly was. Zachary informed Rothermich that he had identified an additional Facebook account that he believed Marshall was now actively using. CS was Facebook friends with BT's previously identified Facebook account. Because of this, he was able to view additional content within her profile, to include the posts made to her timeline in recent days. ZS provided Rothermich with screenshots that he had taken on his phone of BT's timeline. The screenshot showed a post. I'm going to have to pause real quick. This is my daughter, and it's very, very important. I'll be right back. Okay, I'm so sorry about that. My exciting news from my daughter that I've been waiting for all day, so I had to answer. Okay, where were we? So he is sending the screenshots Zachary is sending the screenshots from BT's Facebook. All right. The screenshot showed a post to it on March 4th from a Facebook account maintaining the username Bunny Cooper. Oh my gosh. The post specifically stated, text me ASAP with a smiley face. So that's when she was in Indianapolis trying to get out, or well, that would have been the same day that Rowan's brother went and picked her up from this random address that he just miraculously knew she was at somehow, right? Okay. All right. ZS stated that he was confident the Facebook account belonged to Marshall. He explained that Bunny was a nickname that BT exclusively used for Marshall. Furthermore, Cooper was Marshall's father's last name and her former maiden name. Okay, that makes sense. On March 23rd, members of the FBI Charlotte field office, Fayetteville Resident Agency, located Marshall at BT's confirmed residence in Bun Level, North Carolina. Oh, BT lied. These people, despicable. Okay. Upon her arrest, Growalski and Special Agent Jess Smeltz presented Marshall with her Miranda rights. Marshall said that she understood her rights and voluntarily waived them by signing an advice of rights form. Marshall ultimately told Growalski that Rowan had killed Oaklee at approximately 1:30 p.m. on February 9th. Marshall had been okay, so this is going to get into a little bit of it. Then we're going to get into more of it in a minute, but so I just want to warn you, this is maybe unsettling for some to hear. I'm gonna take a drink real quick. Okay. Marshall had been in the kitchen of 305 Albany Street in Indianapolis when Rowan entered holding Oaklee. Oaklee was no longer wearing clothes and was not responsive. Rowan initially tried to put her in the bathtub to immerse her in cold water in the hopes of reviving her. When that failed, Rowan wrapped Oaklee in a pink and black colored blanket that had hearts on it and put her in a rear passenger seat of the Dodge Durango before departing. Before departing, he informed Marshall. Let me make sure. Okay. Oh, oh, sorry, I lost my place for some reason. Before departing, he informed Marshall that he intended to take Oaklee to the hospital. Marshall stated that she tried to call 911 as Oaklee appeared to be dying, but Rowan struck her hand enough to knock the phone out of her hands. He then disconnected the call. Marshall stated that upon Rowan's return, approximately 1.5 hours later, he only had the blanket that Oaklee had been previously wrapped in. He stated that he left her naked body in the woods. Rowan informed her that he had taken Oaklee to his grandparents' property in Martinsville. He further explained that he had laid Oaklee's body in the woods somewhere on their property. Marshall stated that it could have been in an abandoned house either on or near the area, based on her recollection of Rowan's explanation that day and in the days that followed. She claimed that she had neither met Rowan's grandparents nor had she been to their Martinsville address. Now I know that was tough to hear, but it gets worse because this bitch is lying, partially. All right. So, Growalski informed Rothermich and your affidavit of Marshall's above statement. The FBI and IMPD determined that day that Rowan did indeed have family. Oh God, that stinking pause. That currently resided in Martinsville, Indiana. They identified the property owners as LS and WS with registered properties at this address in Martinsville. Okay, they're just going through those addresses. Rothermich and your affidavit traveled to the location on Redbud Lane that night and made contact with LS and WS. They confirmed that the Redbud Lane was their residential home address. The residents Sedgwick Road was located just north of their home within the same property boundaries and had been previously inhabited by WS's parents before they had died decades earlier. LS and WS explained that they now owned both properties. LS stated that he was Rowan's step grandfather. When Rowan's BW and KW were children, they had come to their home many times at the Redbud Lane property and played in the woods around their property. LS and WS had not seen Rowan in years, though. They did not recall seeing or hearing from him in February of 2023. They also did not observe a Dodge Durango on their property in February or any time thereafter. However, they explained that their property between Redbud Lane and Sedgwick Road was over 20 acres and heavily wooded. They said it was possible he could have been on their properties during that time without their knowledge. They had never seen Oaklee and were unaware of her disappearance. So it's a step grandpa and well, grandparents, and they don't seem to. Oh no, LS was the step grandpa. They don't seem to have any understanding. So LS and WS provided verbal consent for investigators to search their properties of Redbud Lane and Sedgwick Road. S.A. Rothermich, your affidavit, and the assisting police officers and deputies from Morgan County, Indiana, were unable to locate Oaklee that night. On April 4th, Rothermich spoke with KW, that's back to Rowan's sister. He asked her if she had any family residing in Martinsville, Indiana. She immediately named LS and WS and their residence on Redbud Lane. She stated that Rowan was very familiar with their property due to how often they would play there as children. She and Rowan had various locations within the wooded area that they liked to go to include hollowed out trees, deer stands, sheds, and other enclosures. On April 5th, the MCSC authorized warrants to seize and search the the cellular telephone from CM, that's the Chad guy, that maintained the phone number 8808, as well as the cellular telephone from BP, the mom, or Rowan's mom. The MCSC also issued a warrant for investigators to search 305 Albany Street for the pink and black colored blanket that Oakley's body had been wrapped in. On April 6th, they executed the search warrant at Albany Street to recover the blanket. Chad was present at the house during its execution and recalled seeing a blanket that matched its description when Rowan had lived there with Marshall and her kids. However, the investigators were unable to find it that day. So then they decide to re-interview Chad. Okay. My family group chat's going on. Sorry. Okay. Um, he provided additional details about the events that transpired on February 9th. Chad admitted to receiving a phone call from Marshall that afternoon saying that Oakley had been hurt and that he needed to return to 305. Liars, liars, they all have their pants on fire. I don't know why he didn't mention that earlier. All right. He remembered her voice being very matter of fact, saying that he needed to bring the Durango back home for them. Upon his arrival home, he did not see Oakley. However, Rowan told him multiple times that he had fucked up. Chad recalled taking custody of Colton while both Marshall and Rowan left the house for several hours. They returned alone, and Chad was still unaware of Oakley's whereabouts. At the conclusion of the interview, they seized his phone. Okay. As Chad was providing the above statement, S.A. Rothermich re-interviewed BP. We're back to Rowan's mama. Let's see what she has to say this time. She ultimately provided clear details about the series of events that transpired on February. Oh, yeah, now they're going to give better. Okay. Okay. She stated that Rowan had called her in the mid-afternoon of February 9th. He seemed panicked and told her that he had to take Oakley to the emergency room because she had fallen off of a bouncy ball and hit her head. He did not ask her for anything at that time and seemed to only want to notify her of the situation. Okay. BP, the mom, could tell that he was inside of a vehicle when he made the call because she could hear his voice echo as if he was currently sitting in a small enclosed place. She could also hear a female speaking to him in the background. She strongly believed that this female was Marshall and that she was in the vehicle with him. She could not recall if the female's voice also sounded panicked. BP then called Chad, who told her that he was home alone watching. So this whole time, we're thinking that this Chad guy was a good druggie and just called Rowan's mom and said, "Hey, I can't take care of this kid. Come get him." No, he was taking care of him, and she called him. Okay. So then BP then called Chad, who told her that he was home alone watching Colton, the baby. BP picked up Colton from Chad at 305 Albany Street. She brought the baby to her place of employment while she waited for KW. Guys, we're getting a completely different story here. Okay, well, not completely, but very different. Okay. While she waited for KW, that's Rowan's sister, to arrive to take custody of him. Hours later, Rowan called BP back and he stated that Marshall had made the decision to abandon Oaklee at the hospital. He provided no further details and became agitated when BP tried to question him further on this. Towards the conclusion of the interview, who who accepts that as a mom? No way in hell would I accept that. And I know that Oakley isn't biologically connected to her, and Rowan and Madison aren't even married. It's just her son's girlfriend's daughter. But no way would you call me up and my son calls me up and tells me that his girlfriend just decided to abandon their kid at the hospital. I, I ain't accepting that. I'm going to that hospital. I'm calling DCS on the way. We're getting the cops down there and figuring out what's going on. Okay. Towards the conclusion of the interview, Rothermich asked BP if she had any prior knowledge to the circumstances of Oakley's disappearance that she had not previously disclosed to the IMPD or FBI. Rothermich showed her records from her cell phone to emphasize the reoccurring and frequent contacts she had with Rowan that day. I would love to see that interview. Be like, something else you want to tell me? Because look, there's the proof. We know y'all were chit-chatting back and forth quite a bit. The frequent contact she had with Rowan that day surrounding the time that Oakley was harmed. BP denied knowing any further details, but believed it was possible that Rowan could have harmed Oakley. You don't think? Rothermich next asked BP if she had members of her family secure the whereabouts of Marshall and return her to Indianapolis following Rowan's arrest in Colorado, because she feared that Marshall would report to the police what had actually happened to Oak. Oh, I love this investigator. Because that's what I think happened. Your affidavit additionally asked if Marshall had informing confided to her information regarding Rowan's culpability in Oakley's demise, which was why Marshall was suddenly taken to the Greyhound bus station to ensure she left the state. BP admitted to buying a cell phone for her before she left, but denied paying for the ticket. BP again denied any further knowledge as to what happened to Oakley or where she was now. Your affidavit next asked BP if she would be willing to take a polygraph test as to the truthfulness of her statement that day. BP initially agreed and was introduced to FBI's Indianapolis Certified Polygraph Examiner. Come on, little laptop. Special Agent William Klein. BP then requested to consult with her attorney by way of a phone call. Shady, shady. Which S.A. Rothermich granted. After a private consultation, BP informed Rothermich that she now declined to submit to the test. Rothermich then served her with the warrant to seize her cell phone. I'm wondering if there's going to be some more charges coming for this family. All right. Following your Affiant and Rothermich's obtaining these updated statements that day, Growalski and Smeltz re-interviewed Marshall at the Harnett County, North Carolina jail. Marshall again waived her Miranda rights and voluntarily made a statement. Marshall initially denied leaving 305 Albany Street with Rowan on February 9th with Oakley's body. However, she eventually admitted that she had indeed left with him to dispose of her remains. She recalled Rowan driving his Dodge Durango onto the highway away from Indianapolis with the three of them in the vehicle. She remembered seeing a sign for Martinsville shortly before exiting the highway. She then recalled Rowan motioning towards a residence along a road and telling her that it was his grandparents' house. They drove down multiple other roads until they arrived at what appeared to be a dilapidated, abandoned residence parked on top of a steep hill. Rowan parked the Durango not far from it on a surrounding gravel road and carried Oakley inside through a window. Marshall remained in the vehicle while Rowan disposed of her inside of the building. She recalled seeing a white house nearby and a light-colored truck drive past her on the gravel road at one point. She further recalled a light blue-colored 1970s Ford Mustang convertible parked near the structure at the top of the hill. She did not remember seeing any walkway or path that led to the abandoned house from the gravel road. Rowan returned to the driver's seat a short time later and took her back to 305 Albany Street. She stated that when Rowan returned to the Durango, he informed her that he either put her inside or underneath a dresser. He then asked her if she knew where she was. Marshall responded that she thought she was in Martinsville, and he replied, "That's all I need to know." During the interview, investigators asked Marshall, "Did you ever ask Rowan to take her to a hospital?" Marshall answered, "At one point, yeah, and he told me that if we went to a hospital, I was going to go to prison and I've never been to jail. I've never been to prison, and it's fucked up. That's my daughter." Oh, something's effed up, lady. Okay. Marshall reiterated to Growalski that she had told BP that Rowan had killed Oakley. So Marshall's telling her, which is Madison, but so Madison Marshall is telling these officers that she had personally told Rowan's mother that Rowan had killed Oakley after she was brought back to Indianapolis following his arrest in Colorado. Marshall was brought to BP right away, and BP asked her what exactly had happened to Oakley. Marshall told her that Rowan had killed her on February 9th at the 305 Albany Street address, and that they had taken her to Martinsville to dispose of her body. BP then paid for Marshall's bus ticket to North Carolina and bought her a phone. However, BP told her not to activate it until she got on the bus. Marshall assumed that this was because BP did not want Marshall's location to be tracked by police until she was gone from Indianapolis, in the event that they were now looking for her. We've still got 6 more pages, guys, and I know there's some more stuff coming up that's this family, this family, this poor baby didn't stand it. Ugh, didn't stand a chance surrounded by people like this. Sorry, I had to cough. Okay. So Growalski provided Rothermich with the details of Marshall's second statement. Your affidavit, Rothermich, you guys know that when you say in your affidavit, it means, Detective Hubs. But anyway, Rothermich and members of the IMPD and FBI immediately searched many various areas of Martinsville, Indiana, in the days and weeks that followed. This was all done without initial success of locating Oakley. These efforts included coordination with local law enforcement agencies, a multitude of interviews of local residents living in the areas surrounding Redbud Lane that were conducted by your affidavit, Rothermich, and members of the FBI Violent Crimes Task Force, the FBI terrain mapping imagery, and the Indiana State Police's helicopter assets for better overhead visibility. So all of this stuff is taking place behind the scenes when you have people claiming that, why doesn't law enforcement just go do this? Well, they're putting it in. They're putting it in sometimes, and we don't even know it. On April 20th, officers extradited Marshall back to Indianapolis, Indiana, for her charges of neglect. On April 21st, your affidavit and Rothermich took temporary custody of Marshall for the purposes of re-interviewing her about her knowledge and involvement in Oakley's disappearance. Upon entering your affidavit's IMPD issue vehicle, Rothermich presented Marshall with an advice of rights form. Marshall stated that she understood her rights and voluntarily waived them by signing the form. They next drove her to 305 Albany Street. Marshall immediately recognized the residence as the house that she had stayed at with Rowan, ooh, they said the guy's last name, Chad, and her children during portions of January and February. Let me scroll up past that real quick, of 2023. She also mentioned that BW had occasionally stayed at the residence as well. Interesting. That's the brother. She explained that there was a TV just to the right of the front door which hung over the two front windows of the house. If you turned left from the front door, you entered the dining room, which connected to a small living. The first floor bedroom opened to this living room. The living room also connected to a small hallway that led to a full bathroom, kitchen, as well as stairway access to the second floor and basement. Rowan and Marshall had shared the first floor bedroom, while Oakley had slept on a cot in the living room. CS slept, oh, that's the baby, Colton, slept in a pack and play that was kept in the same room. Marshall then once again provided a statement as to the events that transpired on February 9th. So this is a major warning, major warning, because it gets very detailed here, and some might find this triggering, but I just wanted to warn you guys. Okay. Marshall recalled the ongoing physical abuse that Oakley had endured at the hands of Rowan in the months leading up to her death. He would frequently whoop or spank her as a form of discipline. He had also occasionally choked her out. This included for reasons of her crying, urinating in her diaper, holding a fork wrong, and other behavior common of a toddler. The abuse was so bad that Oakley stopped eating around Rowan. This is a 2-year-old little girl, and she knew to stop eating around this monster. This was because he regularly became aggressive with her when she would not eat at the pace he wanted her to. Marshall attempted time and again to explain to him that she was only 2 years old and did not understand what he was wanting her to do. However, his physical abuse towards Oakley would often get redirected towards Marshall if she would attempt to interfere with it. I'm gonna bite my tongue so hard here. She remembered having separate conversations with KW and BW about the abuse. So she talked with Rowan's brother and sister about the abuse. She specifically asked BW to talk to his brother about it on February 8th. That day, BW came over to the 305 Albany Street house and argued with Rowan on the front lawn of the house. But BW left shortly thereafter without finding a resolution to it. On the morning of February 9th, and here's where you guys need a warning, Marshall and Rowan woke up to Oakley crying because she was hungry. Rowan threw Oakley onto the floor in response to this. Due to her crying, response to this, due to her crying, had agitated him. Her head's impact with the floor had caused Oakley to have a red bump above her right eye. Marshall applied some of her own makeup to Oakley's face to try to hide the bruise. Chad came downstairs at some point that day and socialized with them. Marshall prepared some ramen noodles for Oakley as a snack because she was hungry again. Marshall then started preparing lunch for everyone. Chad said that he was going to a gas station to get some Swisher cigars. Oakley initially tried to follow Chad out of the. At this point, the drug addict's the only safe person this, or the only person this baby feels safe with. But he stopped her and told her that he would be right back. Oakley next entered the kitchen and said, "Mama, eat," to Marshall. Marshall told her that she was making them all food and to wait in the other room. Oakley then walked into the living room where Rowan was watching TV while Colton laid on the floor in front of him. Shortly thereafter, Marshall began hearing Rowan yell at Oakley. He was specifically ordering her to bounce on her bouncy ball. Marshall described the ball to your affidavit and S.A. Rothermich as being made of rubber and inflatable. It maintained a handle on top which allowed kids to lightly bounce up and down as they sat on it. Marshall further stated that Oakley had likely been too small to sit on it by herself. She recalled hearing Rowan's voice continually get louder and angrier as he told her to bounce. Marshall yelled back at him multiple times to calm down and that Oakley probably did not understand what he was wanting her to do. After the fifth and loudest time that he yelled at her, Marshall stopped what she was doing in the kitchen and walked into the living room. She observed Rowan standing over Oakley as she sat trying to bounce on the ball. Rowan told Marshall to quit coming in there and sat back down on the couch. Marshall took his retreat as the matter being resolved, so she went back to the kitchen to prepare their meal. Marshall did not recall hearing anything else from the living room until approximately 10 minutes later. At this time, Rowan screamed for her twice. Marshall had never heard Rowan sound like that before. She immediately ran towards the living room. She met him in the hallway as he held Oakley in his arms. She saw that Oakley was not moving. Rowan, continu- Rowan continually repeated, without prompting, that he didn't do anything and that it wasn't his fault. He initially refused to let Marshall take Oakley from him and stripped her of her clothes. Marshall could see Oakley's stomach and chest cavity extend as if she was trying to breathe air. However, she observed what appeared to be a mix of blood and spittle dripping from her mouth when she tried to exhale, which created a gurgling sound. Oakley, ooh, hang on one second, guys. I am so sorry. Oh, weird spot to pause. Okay. So she didn't hear anything. She met him in the hallway where she held Oakley. We went over that. It wasn't his fault. However, she observed what appeared to be a mix of blood and spittle dripping from her mouth when she tried to exhale, which created a gurgling sound. Oakley's eyes remained closed throughout this time. Rowan placed her in the nearby bathtub and attempted to douse her in cold water to wake her up. When that failed, he brought Oakley into their bedroom and handed her to Marshall. Oh, this guy, I swear. Okay. He observed Marshall attempting to call 911 and slapped the phone from her hands. He then took control of the cell phone. Marshall could tell that Oakley was dying. At some point, Rowan returned the phone to her. and she called Chad to tell him that something had happened to Oakley and that he needed to come home. When he entered minutes later, he stated, "I knew I shouldn't have left." Marshall explained to your affidavit and Rothermich that this meant that he knew he should not have left Rowan alone with Oakley. This was because he had likely heard and been aware of the physical abuse that Rowan had continually inflicted on her since moving into 305 Albany. Rowan next wrapped so he was Rowan next wrapped Oakley in a blanket that BP had recently purchased for Marshall. Marshall described the blanket as being pink and black with flowers on it. She also added that it was a Victoria's Secret brand blanket, so it wasn't even a baby blanket. Ugh. Rowan placed Oakley in the back seat of the Durango so that her feet were facing the driver's side and her head was towards the passenger side. Rowan entered the driver's seat and Marshall entered the rear passenger seat to be with Oakley. She held Oakley in her lap and occasionally opened the blanket to examine her. By this time, Oakley had stopped trying to breathe and her lips had become blue. Marshall felt her skin, which now seemed cool to the touch. She could also no longer feel a heartbeat as she held her. Marshall pulled Oakley's eyelids back to further examine her but saw no movement or response in them. She held Oakley's hand before eventually climbing up to the front seat next to Rowan. Rowan drove them away from 305 Albany Street towards what seemed like another town. She remembered seeing a sign that said Martinsville. As your affidavit drove Marshall past the Reuben Drive, Hospital Road exit from I-69 South, Marshall observed a large concrete pillar that had the word Martinsville over it. She stated that this was likely the Martinsville sign that she had first reported seeing during her drive with Rowan to dispose of Oakley on February 9th. Your affidavit and Rothermich next drove Marshall past the property of Redbud Lane. Marshall said the road seemed somewhat familiar, but did not positively identify LS and WS's residence as the grandparents' house that Rowan had attempted to show her in February. Your affidavit and Rothermich continued to drive southbound on Redbud Lane until it came to a T intersection at Railroad Road. Railroad Road. Marshall became excited and stated that she confidently remembered this intersection. She advised your affidavit to turn eastbound on Railroad Road and then south towards the extensive tree line. Following this, Marshall did not seem to recognize any of the terrain features, residences, or roads that we traveled past. Marshall continued to provide details about the abandoned house where Oakley was left as they drove. Your affidavit eventually turned onto 5800th block of South Bear Wallow Road, located in Morgantown, Indiana. Morgantown was directly south of Martinsville and only about 15 minutes from the Redbud Lane when searched on a Google map. Your affidavit and Rothermich directed Marshall's attention to a dilapidated wooden house that sat at the top of a steep hill near a gravel road. The gravel road led to two nearby residences. Marshall immediately stated, "Oh my God, that's it." Oh, I got our little pause here. She repeated this several times and added that she was 100% confident that this was the location where they had left Oakley. She was hysterical and sobbing at this time. Your affidavit and Rothermich requested the assistance of IMPD Missing Persons Lieutenant Steve King, who had been following your affidavit's car during the drive that day, to remain with Marshall while we went to look at the property. Your affidavit and Rothermich climbed the hill and noticed that no Ford Mustang or any other vehicle was parked in front of it. However, they noticed ruts along the nearby paved road at the bottom of the hill that showed that something heavy had been towed or dragged away from the premise at some point. Of further note, the abandoned house had been predominantly made of wood, though not much of its exterior or interior remained. It appeared to once have been a single-story, single-family home with an attached garage. Your affidavit circled the exterior while Rothermich entered through an opening in the wall. The interior was extensively cluttered with trash and debris and was difficult to walk through. Rothermich strongly smelled a sour odor emanating from deeper in the partially exposed living room. Your affidavit near the partially exposed kitchen, which shared a wall with the living room and also smelled the odor. Your affidavit immediately knew it to be the smell of a decomposing body through training and experience. Your affidavit and Rothermich strongly felt the odor was emanating from the wooden dresser leaning against the living room wall near the kitchen. Both parties departed from the structure and obtained a warrant from the NCSC to search it for the remains of Oaklee. They identified the property containing the hill and the dilapidated house as this address in Morgantown, Indiana. The Indiana State Police crime scene investigator Eric Russell arrived within the hour of the warrant being granted and initiated the taking of photographs of the property. Your affidavit and Rothermich informed him of the nature of the investigation and the likelihood that Oakley was in the dresser. CSI Russell confirmed upon his further examination of the interior of the residence that the decomposing remains of a small child were in the bottom drawer of the identified dresser. Morgan County Coroner Mike Ellis arrived at the scene following this and led the recovery of the child's remains. Given the state of the dresser, the upper portion had to be physically removed to not disturb the fragile remains in the bottom shelf. Upon removing the upper portion, S.A. Rothermich and your affidavit could clearly see the decomposed body of what appeared to be an adolescent female. A thin board had either fallen or been placed over the body, which partially protected her right arm from being the same level of decomposition as the rest of her. However, her blonde hair had remained attached to her skull and had been left in a loose ponytail by a black-colored hair tie. Additionally, her left leg was clearly broken at the knee, so that the left foot rested directly over her chest. Oh my. A blue and white-colored sock was still worn on this foot. Given the state of the remains, Coroner Ellis advised that the body should be transported intact with the dresser drawer still underneath it. Your affidavit and Rothermich also requested to have the ISP lab conduct testing on the drawer for any remaining touch DNA and/or fingerprints left by the suspects. Coroner Ellis led the efforts to remove the drawer from the property and secure it in his custody awaiting the autopsy. Rothermich interviewed the residents surrounding the 5800th block of South Bear. Resident KM stated that the property was owned by DP, who was currently a resident of Westfield, Indiana. KM had a mutual friend of DP's named MW, who had recently purchased an old 1985 Volkswagen Jetta from him that had been previously parked in front of the dilapidated house on the hill. KM called MW and allowed Rothermich to speak with him over the phone. MW advised that he had indeed purchased the Jetta from DP, which had been in poor shape, and confirmed that it had been parked near the house at the top of the hill. A tree had fallen on it and caused the vehicle to be immobile for a prolonged period of time. MW had removed it from the property a week prior and had since started fixing it up. At the conclusion of this conversation, White texted Rothermich of, oops, okay. So that would be MW texted Rothermich a photograph of the Jetta when it had sat in front of the dilapidated property. Rothermich noted that its roof was fairly smashed in from the fallen tree. Rothermich believed it partially resembled the 1970s Ford Mustang convertible as previously described by Marshall. Rothermich next reinitiated an interview of Marshall. Marshall informed him that Rowan had parked the Durango directly along the gravel road where your affidavit had also pulled off from South Bear Wallow Road. Marshall informed Rothermich that she had actually exited the Durango with Rowan and climbed the hill with him to look at the property above. Bitch been lying from jump. She insisted that she had remained outside of it while he went inside to look further, but she clarified that this is why she had been able to provide such specific details about the car that had been abandoned in front of the house, which she would not have been able to see as clearly from the roadway. Her and Rowan then climbed back down the hill together. She re entered the Durango as Rowan removed Oakley from the back seat. Oakley was still wrapped in the blanket as she carried her as he carried her lifeless body over his shoulder and restarted his ascent. Marshall stated that she did 2 hard lines of fentanyl to get as high as possible as she to get as high as she possibly could after he left. He came back with just the blanket several minutes later. Rowan next asked her those questions as she had previously described. He also stated, "I don't need to kill you now." When he was confident that Marshall would not tell anybody what had happened that day, Rowan instructed her that their alibi was that they had left Oakley at a hospital. Marshall explained that upon their return to Indianapolis, they both napped for a short while until they learned that KW had turned CS over to DCS. So they went after shoving Oakley in a dresser drawer of an abandoned house in the middle of nowhere. She did 2 lines of fentanyl, went back home and took a nap until she found out that Rowan's sister had turned in her 7-month-old son to DCS. Oh. KW called Rowan on the phone to inform him that DCS was likely headed to the Albany Street now to speak with him. Rowan panicked and began packing their bags. He told Marshall that they were leaving Indiana that night. Regarding Rowan's family, Marshall reiterated that she did indeed tell BP that her son had killed her child. Marshall told her this after she was brought back to Indianapolis by BW and DW. BP, the mother, responded by defensively telling Marshall that Rowan had just gotten out of prison and that she was not going to allow Marshall to put him back in it. Wow. BP then informed Marshall that she would buy her a bus ticket to wherever she wanted to go, with the exception that with the expectation that she would not return to Indiana. BP also provided her with a cell phone and $200 in cash. Marshall agreed and accepted the payment before departing to North Carolina. Your affidavit and Rothermich transported Marshall back to the criminal justice campus located in Indianapolis. On April 24th, your affidavit and Rothermich attended the autopsy of the recovered adolescent female, which was conducted at the Morgan County Coroner's Office. Positive identification and toxicology are currently pending. At the conclusion of the autopsy, CSI Russell collected the drawer as evidence, packaged and sealed it in a cardboard box, and secured it in the locked and secured area of the coroner's office. On April 25th, I kept saying affidavit, your affiant, and Rothermich returned to the Morgan County Coroner's Office and retrieved the drawer and transported it to the ISP Crime Lab in Indianapolis, Indiana for further testing and examination. That's the end of that affidavit. So they took now remember that this is just what happened. Yeah, I know there's a lot of tongue ties for me. I'm sorry. But remember that this is just Marshall's account of what happened. Um, as we know, in court, you know, evidence and stuff can come out, and can show that something different happened. Now, there are some things in here that are already verified, like the phone records and the pings and those things. They've already done that footwork, but they're still waiting on other things to come back, and you still have to hear Rowan's statement of what happened that night. It could be different than Marshall's statement of what happened that night. Regardless, Oakley ended up in the bottom drawer of a dresser in an abandoned house in the middle of nowhere, Indiana, at the hands of her mother and her mother's boyfriend, when she had a father at home in Oklahoma that wanted her, that desperately wanted her. That just breaks my heart. Uh, yeah, I do too. The Good Nunya, I it really it really seems like the mother and the brother were had a big role in this. Now we know that that's just Madison Marshall's words at the end there that the mother knew, but that they might be able to prove that she actually did know, you know? Oh, thank you, Okie Crime News and XX Country. Thank you guys for that. You didn't have to do that. It's a lot, and I don't know if this is gonna go to court. I don't know if they'll take a plea, if they'll do not guilty. I don't know where it's gonna go after this, once it gets into the court's hands, but, if she'll, try to say, the insanity plea. I don't think she would based on everything that she's already given them, so I don't know what else will come out about her. Now, I think we will hear more from Rowan. He is fighting extradition, so and it's very obvious as to why he is fighting extradition. And once they have him back in Indiana, we'll have his probable cause to read through. But I know they're working on it. We could tell from this document that they are working on it behind the scenes, and they have been very busy doing. I wanted to put her sweet face up. Doing their due diligence and putting in the time and the effort. It just breaks your heart, doesn't it? Dysfunctional doesn't happen overnight, but self-realization isn't always possible. Families need networks and community relations for the kind of yes. Yes, suits and boots, that's so true. Yeah, these details were just awful. And then we heard today in the Vallow case that JJ was killed he was suffocated with a plastic bag. And it just breaks your heart, and that's why I encourage you to go out and touch grass because these people out here in this world doing this harm to these babies, it gets to be a lot. It gets to be a lot. Yes, this affidavit was very well written, very well. How many did I don't know, that question's a little old. Mm. I'm just kinda going back through a few messages. I'm gonna search for that after this, Caitlin or Catlin, however you say it. I'm gonna search and see if anything has popped up with them on it. I obviously was not searching for that prior to this because in the previous probable cause affidavit that I have, they're not mentioned in this manner at all. Um, but I will be searching now. Thank you, Hippoporium. Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Chronic, Miss Chronic. I thought it said Cronkite at first. Oh, thank you, Liza. I do have Madison and Rowan's picks not loaded on this, but I can show you Madison's really easily because it's on an article I was looking at. Wait, oh, let me take that overlay back to. I think her Madison's pick was in here. I thought it was. Maybe it's not. Oh, stupid pop. I tell you what, this website had so many pop-ups. It was insane. Maybe it's not in here. Let me see here real quick. I have them on my previous video for Oaklee. I do all my videos and everything off my phone, so when I come over to stream on my laptop to stream, I don't have like all the things that I like having, but here it is. Oh, that's the wrong one. So this is her most recent mugshot and his. There we go. And one of the most recent photos of Oaklee as well. Wow. I don't like to judge people on their looks, but and it's not the tattoos or anything like that. It's just they just look evil, don't they? Yes, Oakley is she's so sweet and so cute. I know, Roxanne, that was horrible. It was horrible to hear, wasn't it? Yeah. Yeah, that's what it is, Running Bear. There's just a like a deadness to the eyes, isn't there? That's how I see it too. And then Sweet Oakley's face. So our thoughts and our prayers are going to be going out to Zachary Snow and to Colton. Just continue. They're going to need a lot of support through this, finding out all the details of this, and just there's no reason that this little angel shouldn't be on this earth anymore. So tragic. So please keep them in your thoughts and your prayers. And I'm going to hop off here and finish with those flowers and listen to the Gannon's trial. Thank you guys so much for being here and listening. I know that took longer than I even thought it was going to, and I'm so sorry that I got tongue twisted on so many words, but I really appreciate each and every one of you guys, and I'll see you on the next one. Love, love.